in this video, I just wanted to come on here real quick because I just got a comment from a friend. He said, "This third temple deception is so annoying because of the lip service. They'll make a statement and people will jump out of their seats." So if you don't know what I'm talking about or what he's talking about, when we reference the so-called third temple, we're talking about this false doctrine that, once again, the Jesuit order is responsible for promoting. Look here, the second result on Google, I just typed in third temple. It says, "End time prophecy. Why is the third temple so important?" The third result, "End of the world. Jerusalem, third temple fulfills Bible prophecy." The problem with this idea, and there's probably like 20,000 results. If I went to like the 350th page on Google, it would still be talking about the third temple. There's so many Christian websites and forums and posts and even news articles. Here's another one. "Apocalypticism explained. Apocalypse! Frontline. One of the prerequisites for building this third temple is not only Israeli sovereignty over the city of Jerusalem, as we've seen since 1967, but a very strange right in ... I'm not even going to click on it. So that actually brings up a second false doctrine, and that is that the Israelites are back in Israel, which they're not, because Christ has to bring them back there. The people living in Israel now are not the real Israelites, and there's like 100 books out there now proving this, where independent researchers have gotten together all sorts of historical facts and documents and even precepts in the Bible to prove that the real Israelites are not back in Israel yet. But the simplest, most definite proof is that A, Christ has not returned, thus they're not back in their land, because Christ is prophesied to bring them back. And then secondly, I like this one even more. When the real Israelites are back in Israel, there will be no more wars. But ever since these fake Jews have inherited the land they supposedly call it, or that they call so-called Israel, even though it's only a small part of what's really Israel, there's been many wars. There's been hundreds of wars since they've gotten back into their land. But when the real Israelites are back in their land, there will be world peace. It tells you that all throughout the so-called Old Testament books. In fact, I don't think there's a single Old Testament prophetic book that doesn't contain prophecy about the Israelites being brought back into the land at the very end of the so-called tribulation, aka Jacob's trouble. So now that I've gotten a bit sidetracked there, back to the original premise. There is no third temple prophesied, although you would think there is, because it uses the term temple in the book of Daniel, but it's not actually talking about a third temple. And it's very confusing to most people because they don't have a good grasp of modern technology and current events. Nor do they understand what the days of Noah were even about. So when you lack the understanding of artificial intelligence and nanotechnology, and then you also lack the understanding of what was going on in the days of Noah, and then thirdly, the thing that all of these people lack, in a sense, this is the biggest thing they lack of all. They don't understand that the world is controlled by Satanists who have trillions of dollars. They literally print money out of thin air ever since 1913, I believe, using the Federal Reserve. Furthermore, the Titanic did not hit an iceberg. It had a controlled demolition. There's research you can do on that, and it's proven. They got rid of every opposition to the Federal Reserve by sinking that ship. So that's something they'll do every single time with no questions asked. They've done it hundreds of times. Kind of out of the point, but there was this website up there for a while called 9/11 witnesses silenced or something like that. And there was a list of like all of these witnesses who survived or were on the ground or escaped the building and all types of stuff. And every single one of them was taken out, even if it required taking out an entire airplane full of hundreds of passengers, your so-called 747 jetliner. They even took those down just to silence these people. And this one, I don't know who it was, maybe a whole group, they were hosting this forum showing you how every single one of these people were silenced methodically, one by one by one by one by one, all of them killed. Anyways, kind of sidetracked once again, but this is very important. If you don't understand this part of reality, that Satanists rule the world, I mean, that's actually always been the case. Only now, through modern technology, the ability to call one another, very verily, there are no borders. That's why the fourth beast, spoken of in the book of Daniel, enhouses or encompasses the power of the previous three beasts combined, plus more power through modern technology. The ability to fly overseas and over countries and communicate instantly, and all of this modern communication. Their power is at an unprecedented level, speaking of the people who rule this world. Furthermore, something that these silly Christian people who are in charge of these forums, most of them, mind you, most of these forums and websites are actually hosted by people who know the truth. They're putting these things out there to deceive you. They know it's not talking about a third temple. It's talking about your body. Furthermore, nowhere in prophecy does it say the word third temple. It merely says temple. And the relevant scriptures here is Daniel chapter 11 and Daniel chapter 12. Maybe as far back as Daniel chapter 9. I don't remember specifically, but most of the book of Daniel is talking about literal things, literal kings, and literal events. But the latter half of the book of Daniel becomes more of a vision and dream, kind of like the book of Revelation with John, where things take on a more metaphorical interpretation. So it talks about a king standing in a holy place and calling himself God in the book of Daniel. It also talks about the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place. And people are teaching that this is talking about the third temple. But actually it's not. It's talking about the technology that has now been on the front lines of the world, in worldview, like artificial intelligence and such things. It's talking about that being inserted into everybody's temple, your temple. There's a very real issue, though, and that is that this stuff has been sealed until the past decade, or even less than that, the past few years. Sealed in the sense that no one would be able to understand it. Daniel didn't even know what he was writing about. There's even a part in the book of Daniel where God says, "Seal the scroll, Daniel. It is sealed until the end, when knowledge will increase and men will go to and fro, increasing in understanding." And actually that's quite interesting, because the word understanding there, it's the same word written about in Revelation chapter 13 verse 18. And the word understanding actually means intellectual prowess or desire. And for like the word wisdom in verse 18 of chapter 13 Revelations, it says, "Here is wisdom, let them with understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and its number is 666. The word wisdom there means diverse knowledge in various things, both worldly and scriptural. That's what is required to understand what the mark of the beast even is. And then the word understanding means the intellectual desire to even seek that stuff. So when it says knowledge will increase and men will go to and fro, increasing in understanding, it's talking about there will be a few people on earth who will not only be able to seek this knowledge because it's now available through the internet and all the books that you can easily order, which were never before available to the mainstream masses so readily and easily. It's also saying that they would even exist in the first place. You'd be able to find the knowledge, and there would be a few among us who would actually want that knowledge. That's what it's talking about in Daniel 11:33 when it says, seal the book. The wise among them will understand and will instruct many, but the wicked will never understand. It's talking about these things. So the book of Daniel is very difficult to understand, just like the book of Revelation. And it's not that hard to understand, though, when you learn a few of these required pillars, I'll call them. The most important one being that satanic Freemasonry controls the whole world. In other words, anything that is brought forth, they're behind it. So you should already suspect anything that's mainstream. Any global events, any new dictates or mandates, any new technology, you should always suspect that they're behind it, because they are every single time. Every single time. If they weren't, you wouldn't hear about it. Everything you hear about is what they want you to hear about, even down to your local television stations, newscasts, broadcasts, and shows. Even the songs you listen to, they're behind all of it. So once you understand that, it becomes much easier to decipher certain things. The next pillar would be understanding modern technology. And if you're a Bible man like me, you'd realize that there's nothing on the earth that's not prophesied. At least things at a certain level, certain technologies, certain events, even wars. Most, if not all, are all in the Bible, like artificial intelligence. It's a huge thing. It's a huge problem. It's very dangerous. They'll even tell you that. And the point I'm making here is that you'd have to be very ignorant to think that artificial intelligence is not prophesied in the Bible, because it is constantly. At least in the book of Daniel and Revelation. It's very key and relevant and prevalent. The third pillar you need to understand is what was actually happening in the days of Noah. You have to excuse my neighbors. They're being used to distract. So let's let them give rights to the Spirit. You'd have to understand what was going on in the days of Noah, because what was going on was genetic modification. And if you don't understand that, then you are literally at square one. You have no chance of understanding these prophecies, because what it's all about is genetic modification, just like the days of Noah. Christ made that very clear. And what's hilarious is that this is something that doesn't take any understanding. It says right there in black and white, where Christ says, it will be like in the days of Noah. He said it clear as day. So what's hilarious is that these people, when I say people, I almost am misspeaking, because literally the mainstream narrative of Christianity is controlled by Freemasons. So the doctrines that are prevalent today, they didn't just organically become prevalent or mainstream based on the best efforts of mankind, like most people assume. They assume that whatever we have today is a result of the best organic efforts of mankind. Like when they say that science came up with something new, most people on earth actually believe that there's like benevolent, good scientists out there, never asking who would be funding them, because you'd find that there's no such thing as good, benevolent scientists doing the best will for mankind. But that's what people assume. They assume far too much about the world we live in. They assume that science is for the best of mankind and everything new is good, and it's just a wonderful world we live in, the modern mainstream world. We're so advanced, all these types of what you would call naive ideas, idealism. This is how most people assume the world is. And they're completely misled and deceived, because everything that's mainstream is actually corroborated by Satanists, completely corrupt. There is no scientists in some laboratory with a white coat doing good things for you. No. The so-called scientists are all working out an agenda, literally of Satan, or of literal Satan. They're following literal Satan's agenda, spoken of in the Bible. So I just got carried away, digressing back about a minute and a half. Your modern doctrines of the Bible are completely ridiculous. Like, here's what I'm saying. If you just read the book of Enoch, you'll learn all about what happened in the days of Noah. But with your modern Christian doctrines, you'll have none of the knowledge that Enoch provides. And what's interesting is that a third of Christ's sayings are literally almost verbatim quotes from Enoch. Like one of Christ's main pillars was the book of Enoch. And then the book of Enoch is actually directly mentioned, referenced, even the book of Jasher. Somewhere, I forget what book in the Old Testament, it says, they learned how to shoot arrows. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? Therefore, it's corroborating that Jasher is legit. It has a similar thing about Enoch. It even mentions Enoch in Genesis chapter 7, I think. It says, and Enoch was taken by God. He didn't even die. God just took him somewhere, changed him instantly without death, which is what happens to the rest of us. Enoch was just taken by God. Enoch wrote a book for us before he left. And in that book, you learn all about what was happening in the days of Noah. And all you'd have to do is order that book. It only costs like $10, but it's worth like $100 million at least. Probably that's even a cheap shot because it's priceless information. And it's so easy to read it. You don't even have to buy the book. You can just type in, read the book of Enoch online. And you can learn all about what Christ was talking about when he said it would be like the days of Noah. Because the book of Genesis is a very brief synopsis of the available information. The book of Jasher plus the book of Enoch, you end up with a book of Genesis when you combine those two. You end up with a Genesis account that's like 100 times longer than the book of Genesis. And you actually learn details that are never even mentioned in Genesis, speaking of the so-called first book of the Bible. So, your modern Christian doctrines are utterly ridiculous. They don't even give an explanation for what it means, like it would be like the days of Noah. They pretend that means that the world was just very wicked and evil. They never go into genetic modification or the fact that the fallen angels, the Watchers, had sex with women and had children. They literally birthed a new race on the earth that God never allocated space for, which is something I was thinking about today, how the amount of food required to feed a human being would actually prove God's existence. If you look at the plants and trees around you, they're in a direct correspondence as far as the ratio of food they provide. It's basically perfectly meat. Speaking of the Old English word for meat, M-E-E-T, it's perfectly measured for what a human consumes. Looking at the plants and trees and crops, they're obviously designed to feed human beings. Something I never really realized or thought about to today. However, these fallen angels had children which were not human beings. They were only half human being, the other half of them being fallen angels. Their genetics were different. They were giants on the earth, many times larger than humans. They literally were not able to be fed. So they even turned their eyes on consuming human beings. It tells you all about that in Enoch, the original cannibals, if you could call them that, because they weren't really even humans. They were hybrids. And interestingly, those who are in power today trace their lineage back to those hybrids, but they no longer have the same stature as before. However, they have the same genetic code in certain aspects and ways. One of the ways which it manifests is in their lack of a conscience. That's something about these hybrid beings. They weren't even human mentally. They were evil to the bone, even literally. They had a different mental makeup. They were completely evil. And that's who's ruling the world today, that their lineage is still in power. They didn't all die during the flood. And that basically concludes the topic at hand for this video, because with one fell strike, or whatever the saying is, I can conclude the whole matter. One fell swoop. It's a saying, it's a slogan or metaphor. Here's the conclusion. These people, which are not even really people, they want to give us their genetics, and they want to be able to constantly alter us. They want to continuously or constantly alter our genetic code whenever it suits them. whatever changes they would deem necessary. And through what they call CRISPR gene modification technology, as well as nanotechnology working together, they're able to modify your genetics from a distance digitally at any time they want. The result of this ability is the true ability of being able to truly control you, in many ways, and ultimately to even kill you at the press of a button. What you'd find if you do some research on this technology that they pretend is so good and safe, literally changing your own genetic code, it will be the destruction of your immune system, and you will have no defenses anymore, even to the common fair use. And these people will pay a price for what they've done. They've trusted in the beast system, which is a whole nother topic I almost feel triggered to go into. I had one person reply to a comment I left on these random videos trying to reach lost souls. And this person said, "The beast is not Freemasons and the secret societies and the government. The beast is Satan." This person is literally waiting for Satan to come here and give them the mark of the beast. Satan is not coming anywhere. Satan doesn't even have a physical body. At least he's not authorized to inhabit it, at least not on the earth. Satan is not coming here to give anyone any mark. His people are going to do it for him. In fact, they already are doing it for him. Everything in the book of Revelations is metaphorical. Same with the latter half of the book of Daniel. It's all metaphorical. It's talking about a king standing in the holy place. It's a metaphor. What does a king represent? It represents power and dominion. What is nanotechnology the crux or pinnacle of? It's the pinnacle or the outcome of their dominion or kingship or rulership. Nanotechnology is the pinnacle of fallen angel technology. It can't become more advanced. So what's hilarious is that people actually believe that the mark of the beast is going to be an RFID chip. Even channels that I would have thought would never say such a ridiculous thing are saying that the thing that they have now, the mark of the beast, that we all, at least on my channel, you all understand this is the mark. They're saying, oh, this is not the mark. It has all of the telltale signs of the mark, but it's not the mark. It's just a forerunner. It's a prelude. It's it's before the mark. The mark will be the RFID chip. I don't know how these people are saying that with any conscience of mind, because it's most definitely the mark. An RFID chip has none of the ability that nanotechnology does, let alone nanotechnology with CRISPR, which is like a whole nother technology, equally nefarious. This thing is double down, it's more than the mark. As far as anything I was waiting for, this is like 1,000 times worse. The technology that is inside of this thing. These people have no idea. I almost feel like God when I pass people my PDF and then they don't read it. That's exactly how God feels. All the answers are in the Bible, even though they took 14 books out, and at least in the Western Hemisphere never included the Book of Enoch, while in Ethiopia it's been in there the whole time, 1,500 years. But even the remaining 66 books that are in the Bible are sufficient, and then people don't even read it. Imagine how God feels. He truly meant it from the heart, so to speak, when he said people perish for lack of knowledge. What does perish mean? It means dying in your sins and being absolutely without hope on the day of judgment. The scriptures contain the path to being saved. Saved is a concept I could make an hour-long video on, because if you're waiting for Christianity to explain it to you, you'll never have the truth. Because Christianity is the pinnacle of evil, deceptive Satanism in disguise. Christianity is Satanism. The things that these people are taught are satanic. It's as bad as any other religion, and in my I wouldn't even say opinion, in God's opinion, based on scriptures, even Christ said, "Many will come in my name and deceive many." Speaking of Christians, see, these people who read the Bible today, they can't even understand that. Just like when it says pray in the name of Christ, it doesn't mean ending your prayer by saying, "In Jesus' name I pray." That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about praying with the authority of Christ, which is a whole nother topic I could make a 4-hour video on, because people have no idea what that even means. Just like they don't know what saved means. Just like they can't understand when Christ said, "Many will come in my name and deceive many." Speaking of the Catholic and Freemasonic Christian Church, the Catholic Church actually came out of Christianity, not the other way around. And Martin Luther was actually an agent, and you think that Protestantism is against Catholicism, but they're two heads of the same beast. And these people are all in paganism without even realizing it, worshiping the devil, Satan himself, spoken of in the Bible. The word worship doesn't mean singing songs. Most definitely they're worshiping pagan Jesus, or in their mind, the real Jesus, whatever. They would never realize they were worshiping Satan. But the word worship doesn't mean singing songs and saying prayers and stuff like that. The word worship actually, according to the Bible, means submit to. These people are de facto submitting to Satan through all of their various religions. It's utterly ridiculous to see it. Just look out your window. The whole world is worshiping Satan, and they don't even know it. And then they have a million religions that all tell them that they're saved already, or at least, well, I couldn't even say that. I was going to say, or at least that they'll be saved on Judgment Day, but they don't even teach that when that's what Christ was teaching, because they don't teach Christ at all. They teach a false doctrine and a fake hippie-looking white Jesus who you don't respect. It's all weaponized. It's called psychology. Christ said, "He that shall endure until the end of his life, the same shall be saved." They don't even teach that. And I could go on and on and on debunking all of their false doctrine, but that's what all my other videos are for. I have hundreds of them where I expose all of the false doctrines of Christianity. And not only are there many, that's what they all are. Everything that you learn in Christianity is false, twisted, sometimes subtly, sometimes obviously. They're all twisted doctrines. Everything you'll ever hear in Christian church, or any religion, even Seventh-day Adventist, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, and all that other garbage, they're all teaching false doctrine. The most ridiculous example that I know of is that Jehovah's Witness, first of all, Jehovah is Satan. Second of all, Jehovah isn't even a name, so it's actually nobody. So whose witnesses are they? Nobody's witnesses. But if you were to give them the benefit of the doubt, so to speak, and replace the J with a Y, like Yahweh or Yahuwah or Yahweh or Yahweh, that's Satan, the Tetragrammaton, Yod-He, Vav-He, Y-H-W-H. So these people are Satan's witnesses, quite literally. In Jehovah's Witnesses, they teach them that there is no such thing as hellfire, telling them that, hey, look at the Old Testament. It says that the dead know nothing, that they're in the grave, and that all there is after death is death. Not real. See, the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures are filled with what you would call idioms. I have a whole book that breaks it down, giving me more understanding of how this works, even though I already understood it before popping the book for the first time. Because it's quite obvious that the word death, when God says if you sin you will die, it's not talking about physical death. It's talking about the death of your soul. I mean, this is common sense. The more you sin, the worse your soul fares for it. You actually die spiritually, or mentally, or in your soul. It's kind of all three of those things. So the Most High's Judgment Day has to do with what condition your soul is in, which in today's times has 3 prerequisites attached to it. 1 is that you kept the commandments. 2 is that you fulfilled your purpose. And 3, nowadays, is that you didn't take the mark of the beast. These are the 3 requirements to make it on the Day of Judgment. I guess you would say, or you could call the first one the most required or fundamental, that is, keeping the commandments. Christ said repent means keep the commandments and be baptized. Being baptized forfeits the record of your previous sinful life. It wipes it clean. So Christ said, change your life, keep the commandments, and then be baptized. Which I could make a whole hour-long video on as well. Because today they're teaching that, at least in the truth movement, they're teaching that the baptism means reading the Bible, you're baptized with the Word of God, and this type of stuff. That's ridiculous. Misquoting other teachings, mixing them together, making their own doctrine. And then outside of the truth movement, You have Christians baptizing people into the names of Jesus and God. God isn't even a name. God is a pagan title. God has a name, and his name is not God. Furthermore, Jesus is not a name either, because there's no J's in Hebrew. And I could go on and on. I'm actually kind of triggered. The past 5-10 minutes was basically uncalled for, but I don't regret it, because some of you may have learned something. Back to the point, this video is about the book of Daniel and Revelation and biblical prophecy. It is one of my favorite topics, though, to expose Christianity, because it's the biggest trap on earth. It's one of the biggest deceptions on earth. In fact, it is literally what is called the strong delusion, which was prophesied to happen during Paul's time. He wrote about the strong delusion. That day shall not come until a great falling away shall happen. What he is prophesying is the rise of Christianity. Christianity being in existence is the proof of the great falling away having already happened. When the Israelites were exiled from Israel, at least the southern kingdom, because the northern kingdom had already left like 750 years, even 790 years earlier, in 720 BC. And then you had the southern kingdom exiled in 70 AD under Rome, Vespasian and Titus, these satanic Roman generals. They came and killed all the Israelites. 1 million of them escaped into Africa. That's when the great falling away happened. Because as of that moment, the Romans took over the Hebrew scrolls, and later on, after killing all of Christ's disciples who they could get their hand on, they created pagan Christianity. About 250 years later, formally at least. They had been challenging and changing the doctrine almost immediately, though. But they created this mainstream or mainstay religion called Christianity in 325 AD. Speaking of Emperor Constantine in Rome, at what they called the Council of Nicaea. So if someone was to ever ask you or me what religion we are, we would properly reply, the Bible is not a religion. I'm not religious. Religion is a sin. But if we were to fancy their question, we would say, I'm a pre-Constantine Christian. Before they created Christianity. I'm a Christian before Christianity existed. Because Christianity today has nothing to do with Christ or the disciples or the Bible itself. It's a bunch of twistings done by the Satanist Freemasons who control the world. This is stuff most people have no understanding about. And I'll conclude with one last thought, though it's not really on the forefront of my mind. It was something I re-thought about or re-remembered, so to speak, yesterday. And that is how this system is ran by not only these satanic Freemasons, but there's actually evidence in the way they run their system. Physically speaking, everything is for profit, but they have another goal behind the way they run their empire. And I forgot the exact example that came to my mind last night. But there are certain elements of the way they do business, like their literal business, where they'll be willing to actually lose out on profits and money just to ensure that you go to hell. So their main goal actually is that you go to hell on Judgment Day. Physically, it's hard to tell that unless you're aware of certain things. Physically, their whole goal is to capitalize and make as much money as possible. But it's actually second to their real goal, which is to get you to burn in hell forever. Maybe some of you can think of some examples for yourself when I remember the example I had on my mind last night, or the many others that I've realized or come up with throughout the years. I might make a whole video about that. Here's an example I'm not very proud of at all. I mean, I just thought of it more or less. It's kind of a bad example, but giving the mark of the beast for free. I don't know how much it costs to mass produce nanobots and CRISPR and how all that stuff works and how much it costs. But giving it for free, it costs money, so they're losing money, but actually not, because they're in power, and they're put in power with one goal: to get you to sin and die in your sins, and now to take the mark of the beast. So it's actually their requirement. It's actually their main goal, because it's the only reason Satan puts them in power in the first place, to lead you to hell. It's literally their exchange. They do his will, and in exchange they get money and power and prestige. It's a simple transaction. So there are many examples of this, though, the way they run their empire, their businesses. There's many examples where they're actually willing to lose money just to get you to die in your sins, even if it costs them or costs them a profit. I couldn't imagine. Well, I was going to say I couldn't imagine being someone without this knowledge, because it's only through this knowledge that you can even understand reality at all, and without it, you really can't understand reality at all. And I'm glad I have this understanding, because it's literally going to save me from everlasting hell in the very real current application that I even know what the mark of the beast is. All of these Christian people are waiting for the third temple. Hence my subscribers' frustration in that comment I showed you. The lip service, it's so annoying. All they do is mention the third temple and everyone jumps out of their seat, even though they've already ruined their own temple, which is what the prophecy was always about. The king standing in the holy place, and the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place. What is it talking about? It's talking about the kingdom's technology that you will worship. Worship means submit to. In this case, receive. The technology that you will receive in your body. That's what the book of Daniel is prophesying. The abomination that causes desolation. What's the abomination? Nanotechnology and CRISPR. What is the desolation, otherwise aka destruction? The abomination that causes desolation or destruction. What is the destruction? The destruction is the changing of your genetic code and the infiltration of your entire body by nanobots, which are actually self-replicating and create like a swarm within you, which you can never get rid of. Most people have no clue what I just even said. What I even said. Nanobots. Google search it. Go on images, type in nanobots. Microscopic little robots, which are designed after nefarious creatures within God's creation. Parasites and snakes and stuff like that with mouths and teeth that grasp the host body. Google search thermogrippers, these tiny parasitic six-sided stars which get lodged in your intestines. And who knows what their purpose is, but obviously it's not good. This is what the desolation is. Once this stuff is in you, you will be the manifestation of that desolation or destruction. You will be the fulfillment of that prophecy. It's not talking about a man standing in a temple calling himself God. Here's proof even a kindergartner could understand. Of course, that would be insulting, because a kindergartner could have understood everything I've said, except for maybe the bigger words I used, but honestly, they're not that big. At least if you're an English native speaker. Here's proof. They teach you that the Antichrist is going to stand in the third temple and have pictures of himself sent to everywhere on earth. And then you're going to have to bow down to that image or die. So here's proof that that's a ridiculous false doctrine. This was written 1,000+ years ago, before they had cameras or printers. And 500 years ago, when they started promoting these false doctrines, like the Antichrist is one man, even though it's an entire freaking system, even an entire empire and kingdom, the whole modern world, and all of the Freemasons, and actually, according to the Bible, everyone, even the civilians, are the Antichrist. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. It's not a single man, it's everyone who doesn't keep Christ's doctrine. But professionally or specifically, it's talking about the rulers, of course, not your everyday Joe. But they're all in on it, even if they don't even realize it. That's the disgusting, the disgustingness, the depravity of it all. Satan would call it the beauty of it all. So they taught that the Antichrist would be one man. There's going to be a third temple in Israel. He's going to stand in the third temple of Israel. Then he's going to call himself God in the third temple of Israel. Then he's going to take pictures of himself in the third temple of Israel. Finally, there will be a rapture, which would actually happen first before any of that stuff happens. And then another false doctrine is there will be 2 witnesses sent from heaven to teach in Israel. And then they'll be killed and then they'll rise up 3 days later or something like that. When it's actually talking about the two kingdoms of Israel and Judah having split after King Solomon's sins 3,500 years ago. It's not talking about two men coming down here. So they taught all of this stuff for the obvious reason of people waiting for things that will never happen, with the very real goal of getting them to take the mark of the beast, because once they've done that, their job is finished, because you're finished. That's their goal. That's why they're in power, to get you to be screwed, to be damned to hell forever. That's the system. It's not hard to tell. So how can we easily prove that this is a false doctrine? Because this was written 1,000 some hundred years, many hundreds of years ago, 17, 18, 19, however many years ago that this was written by John, right? And these false teachings were promoted by the Jesuit order 500 years ago, before cameras or printers existed. So how is the Antichrist going to have a picture of himself sent to every street corner on the whole earth? You know how long that would take to paint a picture of some silly man calling himself God, and then sending it to the four corners of the earth? What about people who live in the mountains or on a cliff or in the jungle? How are you going to get the pic? What if it's too humid? What if the picture crumbles and they can't bow down to it in time? A ridiculous way to disprove this silly doctrine. Here's another way. There's not enough men on earth, at least before airplanes, to actually take a picture of a guy to every street corner on the entire earth. It would take more than 20 years, let alone 2 years, which is the actual timeline, even less in fact. This is a silly, false doctrine. I don't know how everyone has bought it, not realizing that amidst the Hebrew scrolls, they commonly use this type of metaphorical language. It's even God Almighty's style. It's God's style. It's the style of the Hebrew scrolls. Many things are metaphorical. There's an entire false doctrine today telling you that everything in the Bible is metaphorical. But that's ridiculous. That's called Gnosticism. Again, Gnosticism. And they use Gnosticism, which is actually formerly known as Jewish Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism, otherwise known as Gnosticism. It falls into those three realms. They're all the same, more or less. And they use that to mislead and indoctrinate their own members, telling you that the whole Bible is metaphorical and that they have the true understanding of it and that they wrote the Bible and all this type of stuff. But then later on, at higher levels of Freemasonry, they tell them, we didn't write the Bible. The Bible is legit. It's just that we serve Satan, not God. Are you with us? And if they say no, then they lose all of their rankage, or all of their ranking, rather, and then maybe even be killed. That's around the 19th degree within the Freemasonic orders, the Scottish and York Grey. They are willing to serve Satan, if only to receive the bag. They want to receive the bag. They want the money. They want the money and the power. Like the satanic, stupid movie Scarface, that most people on earth think is a wonderful movie. I actually watched it recently. What a ridiculously horrible and primitive movie. It shows you the quality of humans on the earth. Or rather, the lack thereof. There's really no quality. It's been missing in action somehow. Maybe it's from these false doctrines. It has the result is that the whole world is in literal resistance against God Almighty. Which, if you do your research, it's kind of like what France went through in the so-called French Revolution. I don't know my exact history about it, but I read this book called A Storm is Coming, actually by Ellen G. White. But interestingly, she was also on the side. She was the wife of a high-level Freemason, probably, I think it was a 33rd degree. In fact, all of those religions, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormonism, Jehovah's, they all actually sprouted up at the same time, even as Charles Darwin, who was also a 33rd degree Mason. They created all of that, and also at the exact same time they were creating those false religions, including evolution. That's also when they took 14 books out of the Bible, around 1820, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That's when they created all that nonsense. But anyways, the French Revolution, I learned a bit about it from her book. It has many facts. I would stay away from most of these people's writings, but her book actually had some very interesting details, and I quite enjoyed reading it. But having a Bible was outlawed at the punishment of death, and the entire country was totally against Christianity, which is actually a great thing. But the fact that no one was allowed to even have a Bible, it's much like what Rome had been doing for the past 1,000 years. And now, the whole world, everyone has a Bible, but no one understands the Bible. It's actually worse than not having one, because these people think they understand it, which would make them disinterested in it, because when you don't understand it, it's not interesting. And if you told them the truth of what it's actually saying, like my videos do, these people would still not be interested, because they're not interested. That's the whole point of all of this psychological manipulation that the Freemasons have waged on the whole world. A whole world of rebels against God. People who think that they love God. A whole world of people thinking that they worship God when they really worship Satan, according to the Bible. That's a perfect satanic masterpiece. It couldn't be worse. Their agenda has been fully fulfilled and realized. It's perfect from a satanic standpoint. It's exactly as the enemy would have it. It couldn't be worse. There's few exceptions to this. Their programming and indoctrination has reached critical mass. Everyone is lost, for lack of a better word. Soon, everyone will be marked, which is the true form of being lost, being alive and yet damned to hell already, having your judgment sealed, which is a whole nother topic and concept. The mark of the beast. I heard this idea today on a podcast I was listening to, that it's actually a process, and that's something I've been teaching and realizing based on common sense itself, that the mark of the beast, you're not damned to hell forever based on taking it. It's not the action that damns you. It's the technology within that damns you. And I'll explain what I mean in a second, but you might be able to figure it out. This is the reason that they want you to take 2 of the marks. Take it twice. Like a subscriber said, it's a double tap. But in his words, it's over. You're finished after the first time you receive the mark. Trying to get you to take it multiple times is the same reason that hitmen shoot someone in the head twice, even though 1 is usually enough. So the same would be true for this technology. The only caveat is because of my understanding of the spirit realm, thanks to Kevin L. Ewing on his YouTube channel. I understand that things like this, they require your agreement. So perhaps if you've taken the mark, perhaps you can pray against the technology, canceling your agreement with it, thereby disenabling it from actually working on you in the future, disallowing it from taking place. So, in other words, stopping the process that would have you be damned to hell forever, because it's not actually just taking the mark that damns you. It's what you will become, what you will be used to do. The abomination that causes desolation, it's the mark of the beast. That's what the book of Daniel is talking about. So maybe if you've taken it, maybe there's hope for you. I don't know. I'm not sure of the answer. This lady today on the podcast, actually, she did say that in her, I guess you would call it opinion, I wasn't actually listening too intently, but she basically said it's a process. If you repent and don't take it anymore and you pray, I don't think she understands the spirit realm. I wasn't really listening though, but she thinks you can undo it more or less. Of course, physically you can't, so you will perish physically. Because that's one of the main purposes of the mark. It's to make you defenseless against stuff. I have to watch out how I word what I'm saying. 8 months ago, I could speak freely. I can no longer speak freely. We all love Dr. Fauci and Dr. Bill Gates of hell, and all of these characters sent to send you straight to the pit with their god Satan. They are our heroes, if you understand the gist. Interestingly, that's a whole other pertinent topic. Most of these people are literally the descendants of those fallen ones, or their children more specifically. Dr. Fauci being an interesting example. If you look at him under a certain lighting, he looks unhuman. He looks like these Amalekite and Canaanite inhabitants, which were fallen angel hybrids. That's why God told the Israelites to take them all out. There's still some effigies or statues of them, and Dr. Fauci looks exactly like one of them. So do all of these royal families. They all look like those ancient people from the Bible, those ancient evil hybrids. They look exactly the same with their big noses and stuff like that. But anyways, I can't really go into that anymore. That's kind of interesting. Too much for this video though. So back to the point and finishing up. Everything in the Bible is not metaphorical, but the things that are obviously metaphorical, yes, they are. The beast, the false prophet, the two witnesses, the abomination that causes desolation, the king standing in the holy place. That's why in that same chapter, the Most High had Daniel write, "This book is sealed and will not be understandable until the end." Because why? Because it wasn't understandable until the end. It's only now. Even the book of Enoch contains similar wordage. It literally opens by saying, "I, Enoch, write this book for a generation far in the future." This is not for my generation, or the next, or the next, or the next. I think he even writes, "This is for the final generation that will be alive at that time, during the last moments of this fallen empire." That's who this book is for, because it will only be understandable and even, in a sense, useful at that time. It's a shame, though, that there's so few people even seeking this knowledge. So few people who even read the Bible even know about the book of Enoch. In Ethiopia, it's still part of what they call canon. It's still in their Bible. If you're in Ethiopia and you get one of their local Ethiopian Bibles, at least from the past few decades, maybe this is not the truth anymore, not the case, but it contains the book of Enoch, as well as the Apocrypha, the book of 2nd Ezra and Tobit and Judith and Baruch and all those other books that they took out. So the point here, the takeaway of this message is this: modern Christianity is a joke. They want you to burn in hell forever. So what follows fits into that parameter every single time. When I make videos like this, I feel like I'm trying to convince a stone wall, a resistant heathen, like I'm trying to argue with a stone on the ground. That's how I feel like. That's what I feel like when I make my videos, because I'm trying to do the very real and actually impossible task of wake people up from pagan Christianity and other false religions. And the reason I say that it's impossible is because in the book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8 through 12, specifically verse 10, 11, and 12, 10 through 12, it tells you that the Most High himself puts a spirit of strong delusion or stupor onto people who refuse to receive a love of the truth, that they might be saved, but instead have pleasure in unrighteousness. And for this cause, God will send them strong delusion that they should all be damned. For what cause? Why does he do this? Why does he blind them? They're literally blinded by God. There's a spirit on these. There's a spirit over Christianity itself. It's a strong level demon, a high level demonic spirit, using frequency, so that whenever the doctrines of Christianity are heard or repeated on earth, there's a spiritual power behind it which would prick your ears towards it to try and listen. It's called a spiritual energy. Like when you have the thought to go and do something that you weren't going to do, it's a spirit. That's the same thing over these false religions. There's a spirit behind it working for the devil, but actually in a sense working for God Almighty, because God himself wants these people to be blinded. The word truth, according to Psalms 119 verse 142, means God's laws. It's called a precept. In Christianity, they'll read that verse and then they'll make up their own definition of the word truth, but that's not how the Bible works. That's called philosophy, and that's satanic, and it leads to false doctrines, which is what Christianity peddles every single day. Only it's not accidental false doctrines. What they're teaching is what I would call weaponized false doctrines. They know exactly what the real truth is, and so they purposefully choose the absolute worst lie to teach you, the worst false doctrine possible. That's what you'll get when you're in Christianity. The worst false doctrine possible. And I'm not exaggerating. If any of you want to challenge me and think I'm exaggerating or maybe that I'm wrong, just comment in the comment section below. Like one guy said, he received one of my PDF files from someone in some other country who handed it out on Christ's behalf, in a sense on my behalf because I wrote it, but it's not for me, it's for God Almighty and Christ. And this guy, he's like, I don't really agree with all the points in your file. It's not the mark of the beast. Would you like to debate? You send me a 3-minute video, and then I'll send you a 3-minute video, and then you can do a 2-minute rebuttal, and then I'll do it. This is a grown man asking me to debate. I replied, you are a clown. He replied back, do you really believe the stuff you're peddling? Or are you just trying to incite people or something like that? I forget what he said. I never responded. Do I want to debate? No, I don't want to debate. Debating is for people who don't believe in what they're teaching. They want to prove themselves right. You'll run into this a lot with people today who've already taken the mark. Their best interest is to debate, just so they can stay sane, so they can retain their sanity. Otherwise, they'd go insane. Imagine being someone who took the mark. You can't untake it, even more so physically. Maybe spiritually there's a way to cancel what you've done, but physically there isn't. People who've taken the mark, they're going to be the statistics referenced on the Georgia Guidestones. 500 million people remaining out of the however many billions they say there are. Everyone else dead. 500 million remaining. Georgia Guidestones. Google it. Book of Revelation. It actually precepts the Georgia Guidestones, or correlates or corresponds to them. Maintain humanity under 500 million people in perpetual balance with nature. It's the first law on the Georgia Guidestones, written in the 8 most prevalent languages on earth. Sitting right there in Georgia somewhere, with security cameras and all that, just watching over, making sure you don't deface or defile the property. No one knows who put them there, and yet the government is protecting them. And the first rule is to kill everyone on earth except for 500 million people. That was one of the main things for me when I learned about, one of the main pillars of my awakening. When I saw that, my mind was blown. It's actually one of the best tools you could use to wake people up. You're like, look, you see these stones? Why are they there? Who's protecting them? Why do they have the goal of killing everyone on earth? Have you read the book of Revelation? It actually talks about that. What it is a bunch of Satanists called Freemasons. They run the whole world, and they're doing Satan's will in order to retain power. He gives it to them. It's the same proposition he did with Christ. He proposed giving him power if Christ would just submit to him and do his will instead of God's will. Christ refused. These Freemasons are not refusing. They're all too happy to take the bag. And then those that are at the top, they actually do it because they have no other choice or direction. They have a predilection or predisposition to serving Satan because genetically they're actually related. And somehow this makes them have no conscience. They feel no sorrow or regret for evil that they do on the earth. And what it all comes down to is that they want to give us their own genetic code. That's really what the mark of the beast is all about. They want to make the whole world fallen, genetically, like in the days of Noah. Noah was called perfect by God in the book of Genesis because of Noah's genetic code. He was the only man on earth that was not tampered with genetically. If you read the book of Enoch, you can learn all about that. On the one hand, you had fallen angels having sex with women, and their offspring were hybrids, genetically modified. And then on the other hand, they were doing experiments, mixing of plants, animals, humans, and angels, all four. That's where you get the Greek pantheon. Animals and humans mixed together. Even angels and even plants, mixing all of them together, mixing everything on earth. One big scientific experiment. That's what was going on in the days of Noah. Because this is also quite relevant, but I could make a whole video on this one thing alone. The city of Atlantis, even your mainstream history channels controlled by Freemasons to teach you a little truth and a whole lot of nonsense. They're even coming out with stuff telling you that ancient aliens have always existed and that they're here and they've ruled the world and they're still here. Just switch the word ancient aliens with the word fallen angels. And the city of Atlantis, they were on the earth for as long as 7,000 years before God even created human beings. In fact, God created human beings to actually judge the fallen angels. You see, the so-called Garden of Eden wasn't exactly on the earth. It was on the earth, but it was kind of like protected from the rest of the earth, kind of like a realm or a chasm. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's like the Bermuda Triangle, where there's actually a place on earth today. I forget exactly where it is, but the Garden of Eden is like there, but it's not there. That's why people wonder, where is it? Where is it? Well, it's not accessible anymore. It's like a portal is keeping it hidden or something like that. It's kind of hard to explain. I don't actually know that much about it. But here's the point. Fallen angels are ruling the whole world. So the Garden of Eden was like a place for man to be created and actually to live in righteousness with God and eventually to gain the authority to judge the fallen angels. That's why human beings were actually created. Furthermore, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the fallen angels' attempt to prevent their own judgment, because man, Adam, was created to judge them. What do I mean, judge them? Well, fallen angels didn't hold their first estate. They didn't keep the commandments of God. They rebelled. So man was created to go through the same experiment, so to speak, with the intent of him succeeding and not failing. And by succeeding, he would basically attain the authority that they had given up, and thereby he'd be able to use it against them and actually judge them, basically replace them, even condemn them. Especially because it's ironic, because men are a lower level spirit than angels are, and yet men, or man, had the ability and even the propensity, I think is the word, the proclivity or the inclination to follow God. It was only when Eve messed it all up. Adam was going to follow the Most High and replace these fallen angels and then judge them. So they stopped it by creating this genetic modification weapon. That's what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is and was. God did not plant it. God told Adam, don't eat it. In the book of Genesis, he tells Adam once, but in reality, he probably told him 1,000,000,000,000 times. Hey, Adam, see that thing over there? They planted that. They want to change and destroy you. Stay away from that thing. The city of Atlantis. There's this whole field of knowledge in science. They call it out-of-place artifacts. Artifacts that show you high-level technology from previous generations, even millennia ago. And then they have no way to explain it, so they just cover it up. Because in reality, fallen angels have not only been here all along, they haven't really grown in their abilities or understanding or technology or knowledge. They've been giving it to humans all along in a metered way, a little bit at a time, sometimes a lot. What you see today with artificial intelligence and the CERN particle accelerator, which actually birthed the internet, and all other types of fallen angel stuff, that's where it comes from them. And it's been here for a long time. The city of Atlantis, fallen angel city. In rebellion against God, they had the whole earth as their abode or their fortress. So it sounds like I'm narrating a science fiction movie, but actually I'm just dropping pearls or truth on the history of this earth, humankind, space-time reality. That's what's happened here. Space-time was created like 13,000 years ago. The first week, it was angels and God. The second week, it was Adam, angels, and God. And now we're nearing the end of the sixth day, about to get to the final day of the second week, the Sabbath day, the millennium, Christ's reign, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. The second week was the second attempt. Now we're nearing the end of that second week. or at least before the rest day. 1,000 years is as a day with the Lord. That's what it's talking about. Another example of things that are not literal, it's metaphorical. And that's why all this stuff is happening right now, to stop that, to stop as many people as possible from succeeding against them, because their ultimate goal is to make sure that no human receives acquittal of their sins, which is a whole nother topic in and of itself. How the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it made Adam and Eve, or mankind, more evil. It gave them a little bit of good and a whole lot of evil. It made them more carnal, primitive. It changed their genetics. It made them more like the fallen angels, the fallen ones. It made them more greedy, carnal, desirous, lewd, unholy, animalistic, which is a word I hate using because animals are way more righteous than human beings in God's eyes and mine. At least they do what they're supposed to. Humans, we don't do that. Some of us do it way more than others. I'll just say that. That's basically it for this video. I feel the same frustration as my friend repping Levi. Yes, the third temple deception, it's quite ridiculous, but it's hard to point your finger at any one silly doctrine on this earth because they're all silly. There's really nothing to point at. The whole thing is a joke. That's why no one takes this stuff seriously. Like, oh, the Bible, oh, Jesus. See, even religious people hate religion. They even suspect one another of wrongdoing. These religious people, that's a whole nother video. I won't be distracted. That'll basically be it. I would love to go on and on and on because I'm like a repository of information, the result of all my hard-earned work, my hard-earned studies, thousands of hours. I've learned so much. It's a sick world where other people aren't doing the same. It's even sicker where you could do all that, even in a sense, for them, and yet they still won't value it. That's even worse. But there are those of you who do. That's why you've been watching me for the past 3 years, 4 years even. From channel to channel to channel, they've all been deleted, and yet you're still here, finding my new channel every time. I'll make some more videos tomorrow, most high willing. Shalom.